Chapter 20. Dawn's Heavy Light. New Orleans. July 1925. The dawn broke over New Orleans with a reluctant glow, its pale light filtering through the cracked windows of Dr. Fontenot's office in the Marigny, casting long shadows across the room. The air smelled of antiseptic and the faint tang of whiskey, a testament to the doctor's habits, but it was a sanctuary, a brief respite after the chaos of the Tchoupitoulas Street warehouse. Julien Dubois sat on the examination table, his shirt off, fresh bandages wrapped around his side and arm, the claw marks from Victor Leroux's attack now stitched and cleaned. The pain was a dull ache, dulled by another shot of morphine, but the weight of the night, physical and emotional, pressed down on him like the humid air outside. At 35, Julien was a man scarred by the battles he'd fought against vampires, ghouls, and the ghosts of his own past. His Creole heritage, his Catholic faith, and the supernatural reality he'd embraced had left him raw, his dark eyes shadowed with exhaustion but burning with resolve. The anointed silver medallion rested on the table beside him, its glow dimmed after shattering the mirror gate in the warehouse, its power spent, but its presence a reminder of the fight they'd survived, and the fight still to come. The spirit girl from his past, her hollow eyes in the bayou, marking him as the marked one, lingered in his mind, her whispered voice a haunting echo tied to the shadowy entity Leroux had tried to summon. Julien's hand brushed the rosary in his pocket, a reflex that felt more like a plea than a prayer, his body battered but his spirit unyielding. Celeste Moreau stood by the window, her practical blouse and trousers stained with Julien's blood, her auburn hair loose and tangled, her green eyes fixed on the street below where the city was just beginning to stir. At 28, she was a journalist whose pursuit of truth had led her into the heart of darkness, her small derringer now empty, but still clutched in her hand, her purse, holding Leroux's journal, her notepad, and the 1895 case file, resting on a chair nearby. The revelation of the mirror gate, the shadowy entity Leroux had called my master, had turned this investigation into something far larger than a vampire's ambition. It was a battle for the soul of New Orleans, and Celeste was determined to see it through. She glanced at Julien, her expression a mix of relief and worry, the memory of his blood on her hands still fresh, the fear of losing him a weight she couldn't shake. Eloise Dubois sat in a corner chair, her simple blouse and skirt smudged with dirt, her dark hair tied back, her beads clinking softly as she fidgeted, her arm bandaged from the ghoul's claws in the warehouse fight. At 25, she was a jazz singer who'd found her strength in this nightmare, her earlier betrayal, coerced by Leroux, now a distant memory as she proved her loyalty with every act of bravery. Her gaze darted between Julien and Celeste, her voice a soft whisper, her beads a faint rhythm in the quiet room. That thing in the mirror, she said, her tone heavy with unease. What was it? Leroux called it his master. What's worse than a vampire? Julien's jaw tightened, his dark eyes distant as he spoke, his Creole accent soft but heavy with the weight of what they'd seen. Something old, he said, his voice gruff, his hand brushing the medallion on the table. Something tied to the ritual, to the new order the DuPonts are plannin'. Leroux wasn't the endgame, he was the key to letting that thing into the city. We broke the gate, but he's still out there and the DuPonts are still pulling the strings. Dr. Fontenot, a gruff man in his 60s with a weathered face and a Cajun accent, finished washing his hands in a basin, his voice a low rumble as he dried them on a towel. You're a mess, Dubois, he said, his eyes flicking to the fresh stitches on Julien's side and arm. Those cuts were deep, again. You're lucky you didn't bleed out this time. Rest a few days, or I'll be stitching you up in a coffin next. Julien managed a weak smile, wincing as he pulled his shirt back on, the fabric sticking to the fresh bandages. No rest yet, Doc, he said, his voice gruff, his Creole accent softening with exhaustion. We've got work to do. The city's still in danger. But thanks for patching me up. Dr. Fontenot shook his head, muttering about stubborn detectives as he left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the Marigny waking up outside, street vendors calling, a horse-drawn cart clattering by, the distant wail of a trumpet from a speakeasy still open at dawn. Celeste turned from the window, her green eyes meeting Julian's, a flicker of relief breaking through her concern as she crossed to him, her hand resting on his arm. A gesture of comfort that felt more intimate than she'd intended. "You scared me again," she said, her voice low, a vulnerability in her tone that she rarely let show. "When LaRue got you, I thought." She trailed off, her hands clenching into fists, the memory of his blood, the fear of losing him, too raw to voice. Julian's expression softened, a rare warmth in his dark eyes as he covered her hand with his voice gruff but gentle, his Creole accent a soft cadence. "I'm still here," he said, his fingers squeezing hers, a silent promise that he'd fight to stay with her. "Thanks to you, both of you. We broke that gate, saved that man. But we're not done. The DuPonts, that entity. We need to figure out what's next." Eloise stood, her beads clinking softly, her expression a mix of exhaustion and resolve as she spoke, her voice steady despite the fear lingering in her eyes. "We need to go public," she said, her gaze darting to Celeste, her hands fidgeting with her beads. "Tell the city what the DuPonts are doing, what LaRue was trying to bring here. People need to know, Celeste. You've got the journal, the files. You can write the story." Celeste's green eyes widened, her journalist's mind racing as she nodded, her hand tightening on Julian's arm before she stepped back, pulling her notepad from her purse. "You're right," she said, her voice sharp with determination, her fingers already flipping through LaRue's journal. "The Times-Picayune can run it, expose the DuPonts, warn the city about this. Master," LaRue was summoning. "But we need more, we need proof, something the police can't ignore, something to force their hand." Julian stood, wincing as he moved, his dark eyes narrowing with focus, his voice gruff but steady. "We've got the journal, the files," he said, his Creole accent softening with resolve. "But we need to hit the DuPonts where it hurts, find their records, their plans, something that ties M to LaRue and that entity. They've got a mansion on St. Charles, but they'll be expecting us after last night. We need another way in, someone on the inside." Celeste's mind raced, her journalist's instincts kicking in as she spoke, her voice a tense whisper. "I know someone," she said, her green eyes blazing with a new plan. "A maid at the DuPont mansion. She's a source, someone I've used before for stories on the elite. She's scared of Marcel, but she'll talk if we can get to her. She might know where they keep their records, or at least get us in without a fight." Julian nodded, his jaw tight, his dark eyes meeting hers, a silent agreement passing between them. "We'll go tonight," he said, his voice gruff, his Creole accent a soft cadence in the quiet room. "But we need to be careful, they'll have guards, maybe more vampires. And if that entity's still out there, tied to the DuPonts." He trailed off, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them, the spirit girl's whisper echoing in his mind. Julian's, a reminder of his role, his fate. Eloise stepped forward, her beads clinking softly, her expression fierce despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady, her hands no longer trembling. "We've come this far, I ain't backing down now. Let's finish this, Julian." Julian looked at her, a mix of pride and worry in his dark eyes, and nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and protection. "We'll finish it," he said, his voice gruff but warm, his Creole accent softening with emotion. "Together." Celeste gathered her things, the journal, the files, her notepad, her journalist's mind already mapping out their next steps, contacting her source, planning their approach, writing the story that could save the city. But as she looked at Julian, his face pale but resolute, she felt a pang of fear, not for herself, but for him, the man who'd become more than a partner, more than a story. "Rest for a few hours," she said, her voice softer now, her hand brushing his arm, a gesture of care that felt natural now. "We'll need you at your best tonight." Julian nodded, his hand covering hers for a moment, his dark eyes filled with a warmth that scared him as much as the DuPonts did. "I'll be ready," he said, his voice a low rumble, his Creole accent a soft promise in the dawn's light. As they settled in, Julian on the examination table, Celeste and Eloise on chairs nearby. The Marigny stirred outside, the city waking to a new day, oblivious to the darkness that still threatened its heart. The medallion's glow flickered, a faint reminder of the power they'd wielded, the power they'd need again. Julian felt the weight of the future pressing down, the DuPonts, the entity, the price Mama Zora had warned about. New Orleans was a city of ghosts, and they were about to face its most dangerous one yet.